Welcome back to my channel, everyone. I'm Mr. Twilight, a curious explorer of eerie and terrifying stories from every corner of the world. Today, in the series T3 Creepy TRO Camping Horror Stories, I will bring you the most authentic accounts from people who have unwittingly crossed into the darker side of this world. Now, take a seat and prepare yourself. Dim the lights and don't take your eyes off the screen, because who knows? Something lurking in the shadows might be watching us, just as it once did with the protagonists of these stories. Let's begin. Story 1 and Lucas and Sarah in the Umpqua Forest, North America. The first story comes from an American couple named Lucas and Sarah. They lived in Oregon, a state known for its vast old-growth forests and majestic mountain ranges. Lucas was an outdoor enthusiast. He loved hiking, kayaking, and especially camping. Sarah, on the other hand, was more cautious and didn't particularly enjoy spending the night in the woods. However, wanting to strengthen their relationship, she decided to go along with Lucas on a weekend camping trip. Lucas meticulously prepared everything for the trip. He chose Umpqua National Forest, famous for its towering waterfalls, crystal clear streams, and diverse wildlife. The terrain had some challenging spots, but since Lucas had been there before, he felt confident in guiding Sarah. More importantly, he believed the breathtaking beauty of Umpqua would ease Sarah's worries and help her fully enjoy the trip. They set off on a summer afternoon with soft golden sunlight and a refreshing breeze. Walking along a forest trail, they listened to birds singing through the cool, shaded woods. Sarah was a little nervous, but seeing Lucas's excitement helped her relax. After about 2 hours, they arrived at a secluded riverside spot, far enough from the official campsite for privacy, yet not too isolated. Lucas decided this was the perfect place to set up camp. That night, after pitching the tent and starting a fire, they sat together, grilling food and reminiscing about old memories. There was no one else around, only the gentle sound of the stream and the occasional whisper of the wind through the trees. Everything seemed perfect. Sarah admitted she was starting to feel more at ease, less afraid than before. Lucas reassured her that the trip had much more to offer the next day. If the first night went smoothly, she would surely feel more confident. The first night passed without incident, but the second night turned into a nightmare. Around midnight, Sarah suddenly woke up. At first, she thought it was just because she wasn't used to sleeping in a new place. But then, an uneasy feeling crept over her. She strained her ears, but all she could hear was the rustling of the wind. Lucas was still beside her, breathing steadily. Fast asleep, she closed her eyes, trying to calm herself. Then, she heard it, dry leaves crunching underfoot in the distance. The sound was faint but distinct, enough to make her heart race. She held her breath, listening intently, but after a few seconds, everything fell silent again. The next morning, she told Lucas about it. He assured her that it was probably just a deer or some other animal. The forest was full of wildlife, deer, squirrels, even small black bears. It was common for them to roam at night. Trying to ease her worries, he jokingly said he'd tie some small bells around the tent so they would hear any intruder. Sarah chuckled at his humor, though a lingering sense of unease remained. She resolved to go to bed earlier that night and stay more alert. By the third night, the weather had changed. Dark clouds loomed overhead, signaling an incoming storm. Lucas reinforced the tent and tightened the ropes to secure it. They had barely finished their quick dinner when the first raindrops started falling, soon turning into a steady downpour. Lying inside the tent, Sarah listened to the rhythmic patter of rain. which drowned out the sound of the stream. The atmosphere felt surreal, as if wrapped in an eerie mist. Lucas, concerned about the cold, kept checking the tent to ensure no water was seeping in. Then, amidst the rain, an odd sound cut through the air. A whistle. At first, they thought it was just the wind whistling through the trees. But then it came again, closer this time. It had no melody, just a distorted, unsettling pitch. Like someone trying to whistle but failing. Lucas grabbed a flashlight and whispered for Sarah to stay calm. Slowly, he unzipped the tent flap and shone the light outside. The darkness was thick, the rain heavy, and the beam of light revealed only wet tree trunks and misty air. The whistling stopped abruptly. After waiting for a while and seeing nothing unusual, Lucas zipped the tent back up. He reassured Sarah that it was just the wind. She wasn't convinced but tried to push the thought away and sleep. Then, at midnight, a chilling sound pierced the night. Laughter. It was high-pitched and shrill, somewhere between a woman's and a child's voice. Echoing eerily through the rain, the tone was unnerving, filled with a twisted sense of delight. Lucas shuddered. Sarah, trembling, dared not make a sound. Who could possibly be laughing at this hour, deep in a dark, stormy forest? Lucas quickly turned off the flashlight and peeked through a small opening in the tent. Rain poured heavily, and in the occasional flash of lightning, he thought he saw a figure moving between the trees. His heart pounded. He sat back down, signaling for Sarah to remain absolutely silent. The laughter rang out again, this time farther away, yet still bone-chilling. Sarah clutched her blanket, on the verge of tears. This wasn't an animal. And it couldn't be other campers. No one else was crazy enough to be out here in a storm. Lucas whispered that it might be a lost traveler or a wandering vagrant. Either way, going outside to check was too risky. They decided to stay put, hoping that whatever it was would leave. But the nightmare didn't end. Throughout the night, the eerie laughter continued, sometimes distant, sometimes disturbingly close. And interwoven with it was the distorted whistling, blending with the wind. Lucas tried to keep Sarah calm, urging her to cover her ears and rest. But how could she sleep with such haunting sounds surrounding them? At dawn, as weak sunlight filtered through the thick clouds, Lucas finally dared to step outside. Sarah followed closely, still shaken. The forest was drenched, the ground muddy, scattered with fallen leaves. Then, they saw it. Footprints in the mud. Scattered around their tent, the footprints looked human. Small, like those from sneakers. But the pattern was erratic, as if whoever made them had moved in a bizarre, unpredictable manner. Some tracks led away. Others circled back toward the tent. Then, their eyes landed on something even more disturbing. A broken tree branch lay across the entrance of their tent. Hanging from it was a dead bird, its body grotesquely slit open, fresh blood still staining its wet feathers. Sarah turned pale, nearly collapsing from shock. Lucas immediately pulled her into his arms, scanning the surroundings. But there was no one in sight. Just the empty, rain-soaked forest. The overwhelming dread made one thing clear. They had to leave. They hastily packed their gear, skipping breakfast. The trail back to their car was slippery and treacherous, but they didn't dare linger a second longer. As they walked, Sarah kept glancing over her shoulder, feeling an invisible gaze on them. Thankfully, they didn't hear any more laughter or whistling. After reaching their car, they drove away in silence, their minds reeling. A few days later, Lucas contacted the National Park Rangers and local police. They reported that no other campers had been in that area recently, and there were no records of criminal activity. The rangers promised to keep an eye on the region, but no clear explanation surfaced. Who or what had been lurking outside their tent that night? Was it a disturbed wanderer, a cult ritual, or something beyond human understanding? Whatever it was, Lucas and Sarah knew one thing for sure. They would never return to those woods after dark. Since that night, Sarah refused to go camping ever again. She suffered from nightmares, visions of a dark, rainy night filled with twisted laughter and eerie whistling. Lucas, racked with guilt, never tried to change her mind, because deep down, he knew he had taken Sarah into something far more terrifying than either of them had ever imagined. Story 2: Mary and the Call in the Black Forest. Now, we move to another story, this time in Europe, specifically the Black Forest in southwestern Germany. Known for its cool climate and both romantic and mysterious landscapes, this dense woodland has long been the subject of eerie folklore dating back to the Middle Ages. This story was shared on a camping forum by a French traveler named Marie, an avid explorer. She frequently traveled across Europe to experience the beauty of nature. During an autumn trip last year, Marie decided to camp for 2 nights on the outskirts of the Black Forest. Her chosen campsite was a relatively flat clearing near a small lake about 6 kilometers from the nearest village. The weather was perfect. Golden autumn sunlight, crisp fresh air. However, some locals had warned her about the forest's infamous ghost stories and ancient mysteries. Marie merely smiled. She wasn't one to believe in ghost tales. She was confident that as long as she was well prepared and followed safety guidelines, everything would go smoothly. The first night was peaceful. Marie pitched her tent, lit a small fire for warmth, and gazed at the starry sky. The scenery was so mesmerizing that she forgot all about her exhaustion. But at midnight, as she lay inside her tent, she heard someone calling her name. At first, she thought she was imagining it, but then the voice came again. "Marie? Marie!" The tone was soft yet chilling, like the wind whispering through the trees. A shiver ran down her spine. How could someone know her name? She lay frozen in the darkness, her heart pounding. Maybe she was just exhausted, or perhaps the eerie Black Forest legends were playing tricks on her mind. Determined to shake off her fear, she cautiously peeked out of her tent. Nothing. Her flashlight beam illuminated only the still waters of the lake and the endless darkness beyond. She retreated inside, zipping up the tent securely, just in case. She kept her pocket knife within reach and tried to convince herself that it was all in her head. The next day, Marie explored the area, capturing the stunning golden foliage in photos. Although last night's incident lingered in her thoughts, she brushed it off as exhaustion or a trick of the wind. As night fell, she returned to camp and made herself a warm bowl of soup. The autumn air had grown colder, and the wind had picked up, rustling the treetops. This time, she felt a subtle unease. She made a mental note of where her knife was, just in case. Around midnight, as she drifted into sleep, she heard it again. "Mary." But this time, it was right next to her ear. She bolted upright, drenched in cold sweat. This was no dream. Gripping her flashlight, she unzipped the tent and stepped outside, her breath visible in the chilly air. The pale moonlight cast eerie shadows over the trees. She swept her flashlight around, scanning the area. no movement. Then, by the lake's edge, she saw it. A faint, shadowy figure stood motionless by a tree, draped in a long cloak. Her flashlight's beam passed over it, but in that split second, it vanished. Marie's blood ran cold. She had seen it. Something had been there. She stumbled back into her tent, zipping it shut as fast as her shaking hands allowed. Heart pounding, she fixated on her watch. If she could just make it until sunrise, she would pack up and leave immediately. But the night was long, and the voice didn't stop. This time, the whispering came from every direction. From the trees, from the ground, even from above, weaving into the wind, always saying the same thing: Marie. She felt like hundreds of unseen eyes were watching her. The rustling leaves, the whistling wind, everything blended into an unnatural chorus of voices. She barely made it through the night. At dawn, as the first light of morning cut through the mist, Marie wasted no time. Her hands trembled as she hurriedly packed up her gear. Every second felt like something was right behind her, waiting for her to turn around. Even as she hiked away from the sight, she couldn't shake the overwhelming sensation of being followed. Only after reaching the outskirts of the forest did she finally breathe freely. Later, while reading more about Black Forest folklore, Marie stumbled upon a chilling legend. According to ancient tales, a wandering spirit was said to call out the names of lost travelers, luring them deeper into the woods. Some claimed that those who answered the call were never seen again. There was no way to prove whether the legend was true, but Marie was certain of one thing: she had experienced something far beyond rational explanation. Since that night, she never camped alone again, especially not in a place as haunted as the Black Forest. Story 3: The Students in the Rocky Mountains, USA. The final story comes from a group of American college students studying in Colorado. Let's call them Eric's group, a tight-knit group of 4 friends who decided to embark on a weekend camping trip in a remote area near the Rocky Mountains. It was late October, and the cold was beginning to settle in. Thick fog rolled in at night, blanketing the landscape in an eerie mist. Excited for the adventure, the group packed everything they needed: tents, flashlights, canned food, and even a video camera to document their trip. They planned to camp for 2 nights, immerse themselves in the wilderness, and challenge their adventurous spirits. Locals warned them to be cautious of bears and wolves, as the area was rarely visited. But what the group encountered was not a wild animal. It was something far more unexplainable. The first night, the knocking. They set up camp on the forest's edge, next to a fast-flowing glacial river. Despite the dropping temperatures, they kept their spirits high, laughing, joking, filming, and even telling ghost stories by the fire. At midnight, as everyone retired to their tents, Eric suddenly heard a knocking sound. Oh, knock, knock, knock. It came from a nearby tree trunk. At first, he assumed it was a small animal gnawing at the bark, but the knocking continued, steady, rhythmic, deliberate, as if someone was doing it on purpose. Curious, Eric poked his head out of the tent and swept his flashlight around. But apart from the swirling fog, there was nothing there. Thinking it was just the wind moving the branches, he dismissed it and went back to sleep. By the second night, the fog had thickened, reducing visibility to just a few meters. The group huddled around the fire for warmth, chatting late into the night. Then, without warning, a howl echoed from the depths of the forest. Everyone froze. But this wasn't the howl of a wolf. It sounded human, a wailing, sorrowful cry filled with desperation. The two girls in the group panicked, while Eric and another friend grabbed their flashlights and cautiously stepped into the mist. About 10 meters away, they discovered something disturbing. Muddy handprints smeared across a large rock. The prints were small, possibly belonging to a woman or child. Trailing from the prints was a dragging mark, leading directly to the river, as if someone had been crawling or dragged toward the water. A chill ran down their spines. Without hesitation, they rushed back to the others and relayed what they had seen. The unease in the group intensified, and they agreed to pack up and leave immediately. The shadow in the fog. As they began putting out the fire and packing up, the knocking sound returned. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it came from a tree right next to their tent. Then, through the dense fog, a shadowy figure emerged. It was thin, with long, disheveled hair and tattered clothing. Their flashlight beams swept across it, but before they could make out any facial features, the figure's glowing eyes locked onto them, and then it vanished into the mist. The group froze in terror. Then, chaos erupted. They grabbed their gear and sprinted toward their car, which was parked several hundred meters away. As they ran, soft, wet footsteps seemed to follow them, slapping against the damp ground. But every time they turned around, nothing was there. Back at their college dorm, the group was still shaken. They reviewed their video footage, but nothing conclusive was captured. Just faint, distant sounds and a brief glimpse of a dark figure moving through the fog. To this day, they don't know what they encountered, but one thing was certain: they hadn't imagined it. Since that night, Eric's group swore to never ignore local warnings again, especially about strange things lurking in the mountains. And they never camped in that area again. Final thoughts from Mr. Twilight. Camping is an incredible experience, but before stepping into the wild, always be prepared and never ignore warning signs. I hope these 3 stories weren't just entertaining, but also a reminder. Sometimes, the greatest fear comes from the things we cannot see or cannot explain. Thanks for watching. If you want to hear more real-life horror experiences, don't forget to check out my channel and share your thoughts. I'm Mr. Twilight, and I wish you all a good night if you can sleep.